Thank you so much and welcome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our monthly webinar. We have started these webinars. If you're joining for the first time, we started these webinars last year in March. And our purpose of doing these monthly webinars was to come up with, topical issues and concerns that affect women in leadership positions or women leaders, and come up with topics that we can have a conversation around. So we've been doing this since March 2025, and sometimes we do bring guests on the webinar. Some of the guests are people that have been through our Leadership for Women transformative process. Some of the guests that come on our webinar are just, people that are leaders in their own right as women leaders, so that we can have conversations, but also we can learn from each other and cross-pollinate. So I'm excited to have you this morning, where we are talking today about a very, very pertinent topic, boundaries. Very pertinent topic for women, boundaries. And I think without waiting more or waiting any longer, let me actually just get started. I was hoping that we can get more people in the room. We've got about 165 people that booked for this session, and we currently have 33. So we hope that we'll get more people joining as we go along. But to get us started, I would like to have your voice into this conversation or on this particular topic. And I'm sure if you've been joining for a while, you now know how we start. We start with a quick Menti. So I'm going to show a Menti right now. So you can go onto your smartphone so that we can just quickly have our voice on this particular topic. You can just quickly go onto your smartphone, and I am screening a Menti. So please go to menti.com, or you can use a QR code that is on the screen, where you can just, use your smartphone to use the QR code to join the conversation. Okay, so you can also go to menti.com, and the code is 7221-8470. We already have 6 people on there. Okay, so menti.com, the code is 7221-8470, or you can just use the QR code. And the first question there is, when you hear the word boundaries, what emotions come up for you? Safety. Okay. When you hear the word boundaries, what emotions come up for you? You hear the word boundaries, what emotions come up for you? Okay. When you hear the word boundaries, what emotions come up for you? Okay. Unsure way to draw the line. Somebody put in the code 72218. I don't know if that is the emotion protection. Okay, joy, fear. And okay, what comes up for you? The emotion that comes for you when you hear the word boundaries: love, joy, respect, fear. Okay, when you hear the word boundaries, what comes up for you in terms of an emotion? Empowerment, careful. Okay, when you hear the word boundaries, what emotions come up for you? When you hear the word boundaries, what emotion? Anxiety. Okay, clarity. Okay, when you hear the word boundaries, secure. Okay, what emotion comes up for you? Ownership, limits. When you hear the word boundaries, what emotion comes up for you? What emotion comes up for you when you hear the word boundaries? Nervousness. When you hear this word, what comes out for you when you hear this word? So very interesting. Same word, different experiences, and I hope you can see that. Okay, same word, but the what it provokes or what it brings out for the different people on the line or the people on the call, it's different emotions, right? You would assume because it's the same word, we ideally should be able to experience or feel the same thing, right? But you can see already, you can see the anxiety. I'm seeing the anxiety bolded. Okay, fear, uncertainty. Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. We're going to go to the next question. What makes it the hardest for you to say no? What makes it the hardest for you to say no? So there are options here. I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want to be seen as difficult. I feel guilty. I can do it faster myself. I worry it will affect relationships or opportunities. Okay. What makes it difficult for you to say no? Okay. So we can see different experiences there. Okay. What makes it difficult for you to say no? So as a female leader, what makes it difficult for you to say no? No, I'm not available. No, I can't do that. What makes it difficult for you to say that? Okay. As a female leader, what makes it difficult for you to actually say no? So very interesting. Okay. Very interesting. I worry it will affect relationships. Look at that. Okay. And opportunities. I worry that it will affect relationships and opportunities. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. All right. So that is the dominant. That is the dominant. I worry that it will affect relationships. I worry that it will affect relationships. All right. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next question for the sake of time. Let's move on to the next question. How often do you take responsibilities for issues that belong to someone else? How often do you take responsibility for issues that belong to somebody else? Okay. How often do you take? Almost always. Okay. How often do you take responsibility for issues that should belong to somebody else? Very often. Really. Okay. Very often, occasionally. Okay. Okay. How often do you take responsibility for issues that belong to somebody else? How often do you take responsibility for issues that belong to someone else? Okay. So we can see very often. Okay. We are not seeing almost never, right? So we can see that there is in us as women leaders a constant kind of uptake of issues that might belong to somebody else, okay? And I see that very often there is is like the dominant. Okay, let's move on. Let's go on. Which leadership challenge affects you the most right now? Which of these leadership challenges affects you the most right now? Which of these leadership challenges affect you the most right now? Raw overload and exhaustion. Which of these leadership challenges affect you the most right now? Identity conflict and self-doubt. Okay. Which of these leadership challenges affect you right now? Okay. Lack of clarity and leadership vision. Okay. Which of these leadership challenges affect you right now? Okay, so we can see the raw overload and exhaustion. Raw overload and exhaustion is dominant, okay, right? Identity conflict and self-doubt, lack of strategic influence, team dependence and misalignment, okay? So we can see the raw overload and exhaustion, okay? We can see that as dominant right now, okay? We can see that as dominant right now, okay? So thank you for that, okay? Let's move on to I think the last one, or is this one not the last one? What is the thing you need to stop caring that is limiting your leadership effectiveness? What is the one thing that you need to stop caring that is limiting your leadership effectiveness? What is the one thing you need to stop caring that is limiting your leadership effectiveness? Self-doubt, self-sabotage, accountability for everyone else. Okay, so emotional labor, self-doubt, shouldering the blame. Okay, lack of focus, perfectionism, desire to be accepted, self-doubt, other people's perception about me, other team members' responsibility, perfectionism, self-doubt. I hope you can see the amount of, frequency there, self-doubt is coming up. You can see the amount of frequency the self-doubt is coming up. Okay, what do you need to stop caring? What do you need to stop caring? Okay, imposter syndrome, not delegating, peacekeeping. Okay, what do you need to stop caring? Okay, that is limiting your leadership effectiveness right now. Okay, what do you need to stop caring that is limiting your leadership effectiveness right now? Okay, guys, thank you so much for your voice in this. We'll refer to this as we go along. Thank you for this. I hope you can just really take it in and see what those responses are, and you can see where everybody else is at, right? What are some of the things that people are grappling with, so that you can begin to normalize your own challenge, so that you realize that we all are experiencing some form of leadership challenge that we're navigating, and it is okay, All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this so that I can share my slides. I can share my actual slides. So thank you for your voice. Thank you for sharing where you are when it comes to this particular topic. on boundaries. And I will again refer to our responses as we go along. But before I get into our presentation, what comes up for you answering these Menti questions? What is coming up for you as you answer the Menti questions? So please jot it in the chat box. What comes up for you? So seeing the responses, your responses, and other people's responses on this particular topic, what comes up for you? Okay. So seeing the responses and seeing your response to the questions that were raised there, what comes up for you? What comes up for you? Okay. So using the chat box, let us know what is coming up for you after answering those questions. What came up for you? Okay, I'm just going to hop onto the chat box and see what your responses are. What are you saying regarding, okay, we all have similar fears, okay? The realization that these challenges are universal, so to speak, okay? What is coming up for you? We have similar struggles in the leadership spheres, okay? So answering those Menti questions, what is coming up for you? Seeing other people's responses, seeing your responses, like we have groomed by the same person, okay? Right? Okay, that's interesting, Shinki. What is coming up for you? We have similar fears in leadership roles. My situation is not unique to me. We are going through similar challenges in leadership, okay? What is coming up for you? Answering those questions. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Okay. What is coming up for you as you see your responses and other people's responses onto the Menti? Thank you so much. So we're going to get right into our presentation. We collectively hold each other back. I love that. Okay. We collectively hold each other back. So there's something called femininity tremors. So if the people around you are experiencing the same fear and self-doubt, your chances of rising above that are very limited. So you're right, Noella, that we collectively hold each other back, because if the people around us are experiencing, you know, the fear, the anxiety, the self-doubt, your chances of being able to override that are very low as an individual, because the collective frequency or the collective electromagnetic frequency is overriding one person's trying to be courageous on their own. So this is important. And this is why we need to gather together as women to try to rebuild our own identity so that we can rise as a collective. I really love this. This is very powerful, Noella, that our psyche, what we're experiencing as a collective, as women, if it is dominantly negative, what are the chances that we can overcome the leadership challenges that we face? So I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. I really love that. Okay, all right. So I hope that you guys are seeing my slide now so we can get right into this particular conversation. So yes, we're talking about boundaries. What is the cost of yes? So when you're constantly saying yes, what is it costing you as a female leader? What is it costing you as a female leader? So why do boundaries feel risk for women leaders? And what can we do? Okay, why do boundaries feel risk for us as women leaders? And what can we do? Okay, and just as a reflection, when was the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no? And what did it cost you? So in the chat box, when was the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no? And what did it cost you? So in the chat box, when was the last time you said yes, but you actually wanted to say no? And what did it cost you? Okay, let's hear what your thoughts are. When was the last time you said yes when you actually wanted to say no? And what did it cost you? Okay, 3 weeks ago, I had to carry the workload myself, right? Okay, and what did it cost you, Ruth? What did it cost you, you carrying that workload by yourself? Okay, today working on my day off, exactly. What is it costing you right now, Ida, as you do that? Emotional breakdown, my health, okay. Last month, it costed me time, okay. Exhaustion and my peace, okay. Right, so you're saying yes when you actually want to say no, and here is the cost. So it does not come at I mean, there's no, it's not free that you, when you say yes, you know, yes, things are getting done, right? It's costing me my free time. Okay, it's costing you rest, it's costing you family time, it's costing you mental health. Okay, so thank you for sharing this. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, all right. So we can already see that each time we say yes, what is the cost? So there's a challenge, there's a hidden challenge. Women leaders are often carrying too much responsibility and too little permission to set boundaries. Yeah, so we will carry too much responsibility. We'll say yes, we'll take on things. And one of the things that we saw in the ment there was raw overload and exhaustion. So when you're carrying too much responsibility, what happens? You are obviously going to get tired. You're obviously going to get burnout. But why are we not able to set the boundaries that help to sustain us and sustain our leadership effectiveness? So it's almost like we've got very little permission, or we're waiting for permission to be able to set boundaries. We're waiting for someone to say that, hey, now you can set boundaries, right? Now you can set boundaries. So there is that bit where, as women leaders, we have raw overload, we have too much responsibility, but we are waiting for permission. Okay, so what are the 5 common challenges? So having journeyed with women for the past 17 years, right, I began to notice a pattern in terms of the challenges, and I could see that we could categorize the challenges that women face in leadership in 5 as 5 key challenges. So the 5 common challenges, there are others. The 5 common challenges that women experience in their leadership role is the lack of strategic influence. So you get so operational, you get so much responsibility, your head is just down working, that you're not influencing. Your voice is not in the rooms where direction is being created or direction is being influenced, right? Okay, so lack of strategic influence. And I think we saw that in one of the responses. And then second one is the raw overload. You carry so much, you do so much more than any of the other leaders in your role, right? So as a female leader, if you look at what you're doing in your role at the same level as male counterparts, you're probably taking in more. You're probably taking more, right? So there's raw overload. So constantly seeing women who are taking more. And then identity conflict. So you get into a leadership position that has certain demands on how you need to show up as a leader. But your whole life, you've been taught and trained who you need to be as a woman. So when you show up in this workplace, you are thinking, who do I need to be as a woman? Which is almost like a default setting, like you're conditioning, but your leadership role is demanding something else. So you start to experience what we call a raw identity conflict, team misalignment. Okay, so the moment you start taking more, the moment you start experiencing raw identity conflict, who am I? Should I be doing everything for everyone? When you start taking more and doing everything for everyone, what happens is you create a team of dependent people. So you start to have people that look up to you for everything. They will escalate everything, right? They will drop the ball so that you can pick it up, and to the point that where you end up having narratives around, let me do it myself, or if I do it myself, it'll probably be done faster. So you start to create team misalignment where the team lacks ownership, the team lacks accountability. You create a team of dependence, okay? And then a lack of leadership vision. So when you are lacking influence, when you are experiencing raw overload, when you are experiencing raw identity conflict, and you now have a very dependent team, your chances of pausing to reflect so that you can carve out your leadership vision become minimal. So most leaders then, or female leaders, then operate in their leadership spaces or in their leadership roles without a clear leadership vision. Without a clear leadership vision. Okay. I think we've heard this. Without a vision, my people perish. So if you don't know where you're going, right? If you're not clear about the direction of your leadership, what happens? Okay. The chances are you will actually, not know. You will continue to be operational. You will continue to not set the boundaries because you're not clear about what your vision is. Vision allows you to set boundaries. Vision allows you to know why you're saying yes to certain things or no to certain things. So you begin to take on things that are aligned to your vision rather than just taking everything, right, that comes your way. Okay. So again, then how much of these challenges are being reinforced by weak or absent boundaries? So think about it. Your lack of strategic influence. How much of it is being influenced by weak or absent boundaries, raw overload? How much is being influenced? How much of it is being reinforced by weak and absent boundaries? Okay. Identity, raw conflict, team misalignment, lack of vision. How much of this is being influenced by weak or absent boundaries? Okay. So when we talk about strategic influence, we see women, as mentioned earlier on, high activity does not always equal to high influence. So you can be so busy, right? So busy, but still not influential. Your voice is not heard. You're not able to communicate your value. Okay. You're not able to communicate your experiences or be able to give input where people are deciding the direction of the business or the direction of the team, the strategic objectives. You are not able because you're stuck in the operational mode. Okay. So when you are too busy, high activity does not equal to high influence. Okay. So what happens? Without boundaries, strategic work gets postponed. I was coaching a particular female leader in one of the government entities. And when we started, she had no time. She was exhausted and burning out. And when you start our process, initially you might think, I don't actually have time for this. And I normally say this, when you don't have time, that is actually the time you need to do the coaching program. Because that's already an indication that something is off. Okay, that's already an indication that something is off. So I'm coaching it through the Leadership for Women program, and she says, she was picking up, the slack for a team. She's an executive manager. She was picking work for her managers. She was doing work for her managers. Okay, and she was also doing work for a PA because in her head, if I do it, it will get done faster. So she would work throughout the day doing her team's work. She will start doing her work when everybody else knocks off. So that meant longer days for her, right? So when other people finish 4:30, then she starts doing her work. And we started talking about the fact that you are paid for doing the strategic work, but you're only getting to the strategic work after hours. When your energy is low, you're depleted. What are the chances of doing it effectively? What are the chances of doing it effectively, right? So you're delaying strategic work because you are creating dependence in your team. You are not creating ownership for your team so that you can focus on the strategic work. So as we journeyed together, she started having conversation with her team just to get feedback around, how she was leading. And one of her managers says, I don't know what to do because you do my work. So I don't even know why I come to work because you're doing my work. And now she was open to receiving this particular feedback. And it just hit her to say, okay, so I spent my time that is paid at a higher rate doing lower paid job just because I wanted to get done, or just because I have not set the boundary of created the ownership that I need to create. So that was very interesting for her. And she started to make the necessary shifts. Okay. So again, raw overload. As she's doing everybody else's work, what happens? Many women are leading multiple full-time roles simultaneously. So besides the fact that you're a full-time mom, you're a wife, you're a sister, you're a sibling, and then you come to work and you want to do other people's work, let me just see, in the chat box, is any of what I've said right now resonate with you? Can you see yourself in any of what I've said right now? Okay. Can you see yourself in any of what I've said? So using the chat box, if it resonates, please just share to say, you know what, I do resonate with that. Okay. So the cost of overload, what happens if you're taking too much? Burnout comes from carrying work that belongs elsewhere. So burnout, so when we were going through this Leadership for Women transformative process with this particular senior executive, after week 3, she's like, I do have time, right? I now have extra time. From when I started, I didn't have time. Now I actually have an additional 2 hours a week, right? But she also then said something interesting. She says, I did not have a time issue. I had a prioritization issue, right? So I was not prioritizing the high payoff activities. I was not prioritizing the strategic work that I need to do, that my work is actually, being paid for, or my role has been hired for, right? So she then started to realize she had more time. She started to have energy. One of the interesting things that happened is we're going through the process. Her manager, the CEO sent her a message one day at 11 p.m. And so we had spoken about boundaries. So she was now shutting down around 7. So switching off her your WhatsApp. around 7. So she would go to sleep. Usually she'd be available until 12 midnight, even 1 a.m. So her CEO will send her a message and she will respond. So this time the CEO sent her a message at 11 p.m. And because we had agreed on boundaries and she was following through, she did not answer because she had switched off her WhatsApp. So she woke up in the morning 6 and then she sees the message from the CEO and she started panicking, right? She started panicking to say, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? What is she going to say that I was not available? And so when she got to work, her CEO came to her office and said, are you okay? And she says, yes, I'm fine. I'm sorry that I didn't respond to your message. You know the course that you sent me on, which is interesting. You know the course that you sent me on, we're talking about boundaries. So I'm trying to apply that. So I had switched off my WhatsApp. And the CEO said to her, no, actually, I was not even worried that you respond. I was worried if you're okay, because I'm used to you responding each time I send a message. And I'm like, how weird is this? Right? How so wrong can this be that we start to normalize that you responding at 11 p.m. means you're well? I don't know if I'm making any sense. You responding at 11 p.m. means you're well, rather than you not responding means you're well, you're resting, you are taking your time that you need to recuperate so that you can come back tomorrow and do the work. So I found that very interesting. So some of you are sitting here, you're sitting with that where you're constantly available, right? You're available 24/7, right? Okay. And what does that do? You don't have time to recuperate. You don't have time to rest. You don't have time to switch off because you're constantly on. Okay. Then we've got identity conflict. Who am I allowed to be as a leader? Who am I allowed to be as a leader? We grow up being trained to be caretakers as women. Okay. Putting other people's needs first, that when we get into work where we need to set boundaries and where we need to be able to sustainably lead, you need to make sure that your needs are taken care of first so that you can be a sustainable leader. But your whole life you've been trained to take care of other people's needs. And that's why it's easy for us to pick other people's slack. That is why it is easy for us to struggle with delegation, because we are taught to do everything for everyone. So now you're in a leadership position that says, for you to survive and sustainably lead, in fact, not to survive, to thrive, you're going to have to know the things you say yes to and the things that you say no to. Okay. And there, it just doesn't become an issue of yes and no. It's an identity issue. You are now battling at an identity level that if I say no, who will they think I am, right? If I say no, would I still be that acceptable woman, right? So you are battling at a subconscious, at an identity level, which then interferes with your ability to follow through with some of the boundaries that you put in place, So I'm just pause here and see. What are people saying in the chat box? Noctula says, I can relate. Yes, I do work of subordinates because of quality concerns. Yeah, Melanie, so you can do that for a short term, but long term, what are you creating? You are creating dependency. And the issue is, why have you hired them? So if you are doing their work because of quality concerns, fire everyone, you remain alone and do the work, Melanie. Right? You don't need all of those people that are in your team, because you're the only one who can do it at the level of that quality. But also the leadership issue is the ability to influence, the ability to coach. So what are you doing to coach people to get to the level of quality that you desire? Okay. And I often talk about, if you're a perfectionist, for example, and put two perfectionists in the room, you're going to find that the standards are different for both the perfectionist. So I normally see what is acceptable standard and what is your standard, because people can't give you your standard. It's taken you years to get to the quality that you are now delivering, but allow these people to also grow, but support them to grow through the process, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Happens to me a lot. I end up not even enough time for my family. Yes. So we are sacrificing our family, sacrificing our health. I am perfectionist. That's my weakness. I do resonate with that. Okay. Thank you, Gladys. Okay. So those are the things that we as women leaders are experiencing. Those are the things that we are experiencing. So why boundaries feel risky? Fear of being selfish, fear of being difficult, fear of being unlikable. So we are trained to be likable. We are trained to care. We are trained to please as women. So when we set boundaries, it almost feels like, oh, am I being selfish now? Hey, so what happens again with team misalignment? I've already spoken about this. Escalations increase, ownership decreases, and dependency increases. So when you have a team that's really dependent on you, that's heavy emotionally, right? But also increases your workload, okay? So when we are rescuing the team, it creates dependency unintentionally, okay? When we are rescuing the team all the time, we are creating dependence unintentionally, okay? And then what we also have is a lack of vision, as we spoke about earlier on. So leadership vision requires reflection, thinking time, sense making, and future orientation. But if you're constantly tired, exhausted from taking too much, your chances, or you do not actually have the capacity for future orientation, right? The ability to reflect, the ability to sense make demands psychological capacity. But if you're already feeling loaded or overloaded, chances are you will not be able to sense make, you will not be able to do future orientation because you don't have the capacity to do so. Okay, so every yes carries a hidden no. Okay, every yes, remember, when you say yes, what are you saying no to? Okay, every time you say yes, what are you saying no to? Okay, but again, understand this, women, based on the conditioning, the hidden curriculum, we're often socialized to be accommodating, to be helpful, to keep the peace. Did you see that in our chat box, right? About keeping peace, which is very interesting, right? So to put others first, to avoid conflict, and to be emotionally available. So we're trained to do that. So the conditioning messages we receive as women: good girls don't upset people, be nice, think of others first, don't be difficult, keep everyone happy. The challenge, these messages create successful caregivers. They do not necessarily create sustainable leaders. So we need to be different. We need to recode ourselves if we're going to thrive in the business and in the work environment, okay? And again, knowing that behavior change is not enough. So most of us would have had or would have been told that, as an advice, say no, right? So it's not the first time you're hearing about the boundaries or setting no. So what's the struggle? Why are we not doing it? Okay, we hear delegate, but you still struggle with delegation. You hear pushback, but you still struggle with pushback. Why? Because it is not a behavior issue, it is an identity issue. Okay, it is an identity issue, not an information issue. So you cannot just get information. Great, we are sitting here and having a conversation and raising awareness, but this information doesn't change identity. How do we build identity? We build identity through spaced repetition. Okay, repetition builds identity. So the more you hear the information and you apply the information, the more you rebuild a different identity. Okay, and that is why behavior change alone is not enough. So what are the identity asks? Okay, who do I believe I need to be? Who do I believe I need to be? So from pleaser to rescuer to caretaker, you need to move to leader, coach, strategist, and capacity builder. Boundaries become easier when identity changes. Boundaries become easier. So you need an identity transformation in order for you to set and maintain and sustain boundaries. It's not just about behavior change. It is about identity transformation. So what are the 3 identity shifts we need to make? From responsibility for everyone to responsibility for leadership. You need to understand what leadership is, right? It's casting the vision, right? It is influencing people towards the vision. Okay, so but now if the work you're doing doesn't give you an opportunity to cast that vision, you're being responsible for everyone instead of being responsible for leadership. From being needed to creating capability. People need to operate without you. I remember one time I was coaching an executive team. The CEO had not taken leave for 3 years. And as we went through the effective leadership development with his executive team, he was able to take a full month off for the first time. when he came back, the organization had performed better. So he thought things would fall apart. So you build capability. If your team is not able to operate without you, yeah, if they are not able to operate without you, you're not leading. Okay, if your team is not able to operate without you, you're not leading. So you build capability from proving worthy to leading from worthy. Okay, we don't need to constantly be prove our worth by doing more or taking more. Okay, so again, these are some of the myths that we have. If I stop helping, I'm not a good leader. Reality, good leaders do not create dependence, they create ownership. Okay, if I say no, I will disappoint people. Reality, leadership requires occasional disappointment. There are people who will be disappointed. But even now, as you are helping, there are people who are disappointed by your helping. Right? So we cannot not avoid disappointment at all completely. We can't take it out. You cannot meet everyone's expectations simultaneously. It's not possible. I can do it faster myself. Reality, today, perhaps you can do it faster. But over time, team capability decreases. Leader exhaustion increases. Okay? So I think we need to look at it. What do you want to create long-term? What do you want to create long-term? What do you want to create? Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are clear agreements about what you will and will not carry. Okay? They protect your energy, they protect your focus, they protect your capacity, they protect your relationship, and they protect your strategic contribution. This is what boundaries do. So if you are lacking energy, boundary. Lacking focus, boundaries. Capacity, boundaries. Your relationships are paying for you being always on and available, boundaries. You are not clear about what your value proposition is, right? What your strategic contribution is, boundaries. Boundaries, if that makes sense, okay? So what are some of the boundaries we need to think about? Time boundaries, boundaries around time. Ask yourself what deserves execution attention. Sorry, what deserves executive attention? What can be delegated? What can stop? Every commitment and its place. So we talk about prioritization, high payoff activities, the important, the imperative. You need to be clear. Is this imperative? Is it important? Okay. So that when you are prioritizing, you're clear about what needs to get done by you, what can be delayed, what can be given to somebody else. Boundaries around responsibility. Before taking over, ask yourself, whose responsibility is this? Leadership maturity often involves returning responsibility. Okay, emotional labor boundaries. Boundaries around emotional labor. Women frequently become the therapist, the mediator, the absorber of stress. Okay, support people do not carry everyone. So support and caring are different. Okay, support and caring are different. Okay, boundaries around availability. So availability boundaries. Being available all time creates interruptions, dependence, and reactive leadership. So availability should be intentional, not automatic. You need, when you say you're available, how is it servicing your vision? How is it servicing your goals? How is it servicing the work that you do, your strategic contribution? So I think that is important. Boundaries around self, protect health, recovery, sleep, relationships, and personal goals. One of the things that we saw was the health, was the raw overload, the exhaustion, the burnout. Those were some of the concerns that we had. So you need to be able to protect. Remember, you're the asset, you're the instrument of leadership. So if you are depleted, chances of being able to lead sustainably become lower as well. A depleted leader cannot sustainably save others. A depleted leader cannot sustainably save others. Okay. So when do you overstep your own boundaries? Okay. When do you overstep your own boundaries? So in the chat box, when do you've got a boundary, you do have it, and you start overstepping it yourself. You're the one who is actually overstepping the boundary. What happens? What's going on? When do you overstep your own boundaries? So in the chat box, let me hear your responses. When do you overstep your own boundaries? What happens when you start overstepping your own boundaries? You know what the boundary is. You start overstep because I feel guilty, okay, of not being available. Okay, so when I'm feeling guilty, so you see how the emotional intelligence is critical. The ability to manage your emotions becomes very important. When I feel fear of conflict, when I accept more than I can handle, okay? So fear of conflict. So here, again, the ability to manage emotions is very critical. Maybe we need just a session on emotional intelligence alone, okay? So because we need to engage with the fear. Fear is feedback. Fear is information. but how do we use it? How do we turn that information? How do we turn the data, the emotional data, into information? How do we turn the emotional data into information that can help us to navigate the leadership challenges that we face, Okay, all right. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. So I'm most likely to overstep my own boundaries when I want approval. I fear conflict. I feel guilty. I want to prove myself, and I fear disappointing. So this is common for women. Okay, this is common for us as women, that we often step our own boundaries. So what it is, just to reframe, boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries are direction. Boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are stewardship. Okay, boundaries are not weakness. Boundaries are leadership. Okay.
Mavis, excuse me, I'm setting a boundary for you. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for that. Okay, so sustainable leadership requires emotional renewal, strategic focus, team ownership, health boundaries, and identity alignment. Leadership is not about caring more. It is about caring the right things. Okay, so sustainable leadership, we want to sustain leadership. We want to be able to thrive as women leaders or as female leaders in organizations. We need to be able to understand what sustainable leadership, or even practice this. Okay, so based on this conversation, what boundaries would create the greatest impact? What is the one boundary that is going to create the greatest impact for you? So in the chat box, what is the one boundary that is going to create the greatest impact for you? What is the one boundary that's going to create the greatest impact for you? Okay, using the chat box, what is the one boundary? Saying no. Okay, what is the one boundary that's going to create impact for you? What is the one boundary that's going to create the greatest impact? Set a rule and stick to it. Stop taking over. Time management. Not to be the mighty savior. Oh yes, Noctula Jesus. The mighty savior of all. Trying to be a Jesus. Constructive no and reasoning why it can be done. Stop being available for every need. Okay. What is the one boundary that can make a difference for you? Okay, so final thought, the greatest risk is not saying no. The greatest risk is spending years saying yes to everything and becoming unavailable for yourself and for the work you only can do. So please read that again loud to yourself. The greatest risk is not saying no. The greatest risk is this spending years saying yes to everything and everyone and becoming unavailable for yourself in the work that you only can do. You only can do. So very important. That is my final thoughts, key takeaways. Boundaries are leadership issue and an identity issue, right? So for you to be able to set boundaries clearly, you need to be able to change your identity. And as mentioned, information doesn't change identity. A transformative process is what changes identity. So every boundary you set is a vote for the leader you're becoming. And this is why boundaries are important. This is why boundaries are important. And with that, guys, it comes to the end of our conversation around boundaries. I hope you found it very useful. But again, very important, this conversation is giving you information. We take leaders through a leadership transformative process, which allows for identity change. We will email you information regarding our Leadership for Women transformative process, because this is identity work. It's not information work. Most of us, some of the things that I've mentioned, you probably tried them, but we're not able to follow through consistently because it's not surface level. You need to shift from the identity level to be able to sustain your own leadership in order to sustain your leadership. Okay, so it's conditioning work that we need to do. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining. Also wanted to let you know, if you're in Johannesburg, we are launching my new book on Saturday, the 27th. I've put the link in the chat. If you're interested and you're in Johannesburg, you are welcome to book for the book launch that's upcoming 27 June on, and the book is on financial confidence for a well-being. Financial confidence for a well-being. Do we break our boundaries for more financial gain so that we can provide better for our families? At what cost, Michelle? So you actually break your boundaries for financial gain, what is it costing you? What is the cost that you're not putting into consideration? Yes, you're getting in more money, but if your health starts to suffer, if your children starts to act up because the mother is not available, what are the costs you're not factoring while you're gaining? Okay, so think about that. What are the costs that you are not factoring while you're gaining? So thanks for that question. So think about that. Okay, I don't know if there are any other questions. I don't see any other questions, but you're welcome to email me any other questions or follow up. If you do think we need a follow up on this particular topic, I know it's pertinent. It's a struggle for many women. If you do think that we need a follow up conversation on this, please don't hesitate to send an email. But I do hope that you take one or two things that you can go and put into practice immediately. Remember, identity changes from repetition. So if you take one idea that you start repeating from now, you will start to see the shift. But thank you very much and have yourself a great weekend. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, people, for your precious time and attention. Thank you, Mavis. And we will be giving you the details of the recording so that you can watch it again or pass it on to somebody else you think may get value from it. And we'll give you Maggie's contact so that you can follow up with her as well. Thank you so much, people. Goodbye. Enjoy the weekend.